So in this second part of our recorded class, we will finish the discussion of Linda Brewer's 2020 and get to discuss our new narrative element, the narration and point of view, in a separate presentation. We've reached the point when actually Bill didn't take it any longer, and he asked Ruthie to stop driving. And this is when when she actually referred to the character of Bigfoot as real, as she saw it in reality. So in front of you, as you may see, this is part of our first presentation. This is the Indian paintbrush, which is a kind of plant that, as he knows, it doesn't grow near Chicago. And in the second slide, there is the golden eagle that is also a kind of rare bird that is not found in many places in the US. So it settled in specific particular places. And here's the Bigfoot that looks like a tree stump, actually, with two eyes. So when he referred to, or when he turned to see what she referred to, he saw a tree stump with two red spots reflecting back, as if this is a kind of Bigfoot, but she referred to it as Bigfoot. So the idea of two different people seeing the same thing or looking at the same thing, but they both have different visions or different interpretations of that real thing or reality. Later on, she referred to the big buffalo near Fargo, and then the UFO, which is, or which refers to the unidentified flying object. And this is when he actually realized that she is able to see things beyond normal people. The last paragraph in here refers to the idea of how Bill came to accept Ruthie as she is, with no judgment, with no previous preconceptions. He got to learn a lesson that we're different. We look at certain specific similar things, but we're not similar in our reactions or interpretations of these things, right? So after asking her to stop, she referred to him as a genius or as a handsome genius. I'm so glad I got to come with you. And then at this point, he looked at her eyes and he saw big blue eyes, able to see wonderful sights, like all the things that we mentioned, and another handsome genius in the person of Bell himself. So maybe nobody referred to him as handsome genius before, because Ruthie refers to things that do not exist. So this last vision actually hit him for some time, and he decided to let it ride. The idea of let it ride here is the conclusion or the resolution, which refers to how Bell changed after this experience or road trip with Ruthie. It seems that he learned that we are not the same and we see things differently. So he just got to accept it as it is. And this is actually my own commentary on 2020 by Linda Brewer. So I'd like to hear more from you on the forum about our DQs or the discussion questions that we have. In addition to other roles that you may have, connecting or summarizing or enriching our reading of such a story. 3 important stories, 2020, The Elephant, and Cathedral, that are related in a way or another, and we can come up with certain similar ideas or topics or themes when we discuss them together under certain subjects. So yeah, let's continue this work on our forum. And the next step will be a discussion of our narration and point of view as a second narrative element for this semester. So as you may see here, the presentation, narration, and point of view starts with this slide that defines the word narrator for you. And we did discuss this before, as the narrator is a character who tells the story, and this character could be an inside character from inside the story, or it could be a character from outside the story. And for each of these two cases, we have a kind of narrator or narration related to it. Please remember that the author is not the narrator, or the narrator is not the author, unless you have a proof that the author is telling you his own or her own story, and this is a kind of personal commentary on something so related, subjective to the author himself. Another word that is related to a narrator is persona, and as students of literature, you have to be familiar with the word persona. This is something that we can use in fiction and later on in poetry as well. So literally, persona refers to the actor's mask in Latin. So it's a Latin word that refers to the mask that is worn by actors on stage performances. So since it's a mask, so it is a kind of fake identity that the actor puts on to play a certain role. So literally, it is actually a reference to the voice, the individual style, or the verbal personality in the story. Or it's related highly to the author as represented in the narrator in the story. So the voice chosen by the author to tell and structure the story is also the persona. So the persona here means the narrator, the voice. So they are all similar in this way, in this meaning: persona, narrator, and the voice. Persona also refers to the individual style in which a certain author writes, and sometimes there is a kind of specific particular style that refers to each individual writer. So you can read a short sentence, a short paragraph, and then you say, well, this is Najib Mahfoud, for example, or this is Shakespeare. The style of writing itself, there is a kind of pattern, there is a kind of voice, or a kind of certain choice of words that you can guess about a specific writer. So his individual style is actually the persona. The persona also refers to the verbal personality of the narrator. Verbal, it means also the choice of words. So the persona could share with the author or could not share with the author the values or the beliefs he carries or she carries. So we need to be careful when we refer to the voice or the choice of words or the verbal personality in the story as referring to the persona or the narrator and not the author. The word point of view is also an important aspect of literature or of the narrative related to the narrator. And it has two parts. The first part is focus, and the second part is voice. The focus here is the angle of vision, zawiyat al-ru'ya, the point from which people, characters, events, other details in the story are viewed. So this angle determines the space, the closeness, or the distance between the narrator and the characters, the narrator and the readers, and the readers and the characters at the same time. So it measures or it determines the closeness or the distance, the way between you or the space between you and the characters. So if the narrator is all-knowing, telling you everything, then you're close to the characters. If he is hiding some parts of some characters, then you are away or distant from the characters. So that angle of vision is a reference to how the narrator presents the characters, the events, and other details in the story to the reader. The voice is the source of the story's words, and this can be acknowledged or unacknowledged. So the speaker in the story or the narrator may acknowledge the way he chooses or she chooses the source of his words. So he knows very well that he's religiously, for example, oriented in the source of his words, or vice versa. He could not be aware of the source of his words in the story. So this can be also a reference to the voice or the form or the format through which the narrator tells the story. The form itself can refer the way he structures the story. It starts this in this event, it starts in medias res, as we said, in 2020, and it continues to cover some aspects of the characters' lives, and then it goes back to the past with a flashback, something like this. So that structure chosen by the narrator to tell you the story can be called voice. The verbal aspect of narration is also a reference to the voice, as we said in the previous here slide, that the verbal personality or the verbal aspect of the narration is also related to the voice and the persona. So persona, voice, style, verbal personality can sometimes refer to the same thing. Related to the narrator of the story. There are three kinds of the narrator in literature: the first person, the second person, the third person. And the first person narrator is actually the character who uses I or we to tell you the story. And this is an indication that he uses the I and we to tell you a personal experience or to tell you something subjective and personal about himself. So it necessarily presents, I mean, the narrative here presents a kind of limited point of view, because the narrator will not tell you all about other characters, because he is seeing the events or the action from his own side or angle of vision. So we call this a limited point of view. And since he's hiding consciously or unconsciously some parts of the story, we can say that he is unreliable. So sometimes he's unreliable, that I can't trust him to tell me the truth about the story. If he's only focusing on himself, then this is his perspective about the story, and there could be other perspectives of other characters included. So the narrator is a character in the story, then it is a first-person narrator. In the second-person narrator, which I don't have a slide for here, the narrator is talking to somebody using you, which is the second-person pronoun. And this is not common in literature. We have stories that adopt the second-person narration style, but it's not that common. So we will focus only on the first and third person narrator here. The third person narrator is a character outside the story. He uses he, she, it, they to tell the story. And since he's able to see them from outside, to see all characters from outside, it's undetermined of if he is limited or unlimited. So you have to read everything. You have to analyze the voice, the reference to each of the characters to be able to determine if this is a limited point of view or unlimited point of view, or if this narrator is reliable or unreliable. The limited point of view is the first type of the point of view here, or the angle of vision, or the focus, as we say. This is why I have limited focus here. So we can define it as a perspective pinned to a single character. And look at the word pinned, P-I-N. as if this is focused on one single character, whether first person narrator or third person narrator. So he or she focuses on one character. We cannot know for sure what is going on in the minds of other characters. So the point of view wanders like يتجول like a camera from one character to another, but it doesn't get inside anyone's thoughts or minds. Focus on one single character, we can get into the mind and the thoughts of that only character, but not to the other characters or the thoughts and minds of other characters. So a camera jumping from one character to another physically outside with no deep insertion of the to the thoughts and the mind of the characters. The second type of the point of view is the unlimited one, or we can refer to it as omniscient point of view. Omniscient means all-knowing. So that's the person who, or the narrator who plays God-like role. You know, he's like the omniscient, like God. He knows everything and he presents everything he knows to you as the reader. So a perspective that can be seen from one character's view, then another's, and it can be moved in or out of any character's mind at any time. And you as a reader has access to the perceptions and thoughts of all characters. So the idea that the narrator is able to make you aware of every single aspect of each character's life in the story. So if you have 4 characters, then you're able to see in and out of each of the characters. You move in and out of each character's mind, and you can see all their views and their perspectives on the events. This is an all-knowing narration that we call unlimited, or the best way to describe it is omniscient point of view. For example, there are third-person narrators with unlimited access to the thoughts of more than one character, like the all-knowing thing, like Roman Fever, Edith Wharton's Roman Fever. We will not read it this semester, but this is something that we read in other semesters. Third person, unlimited access to both characters in the story were exposed to you as a reader, and you know everything about them and the way they think and act and behave and feel and so on. One kind of character that is also common in literature, well, not in all narratives, but sometimes we have a character to which the fiction or the story is addressed, but he's not the reader and he's not one of the characters. So who is he or she? Someone other than the reader. A character within the fiction, but not a playing character, like he's not one of the major or minor characters to whom the story or the speech is addressed. So you see that the narrator is talking to somebody, but this is not you, because he reveals to you some aspects of that person that is not you. And there is a kind of possible reaction in the story of this character. So the story is addressed to this character, and there could be a kind of reaction of that character towards the story. But this is not the reader, and it's not one of the characters. We do have such a character in The Cask of Amontillado, which we will read by Edgar Allan Poe. And you may hear the narrator at the beginning of the story talking to somebody. And then you ask yourself, who is this? And reading all through the story, you will not find an answer, because the narrator, stopped referring to that person. It's just in the first scene. So you may ask yourself a question about the identity of this ambiguous character to whom the story is addressed, and you keep waiting for a kind of reaction for that or by that character, and unfortunately the story ends with no reference to that character. So we have to consider it. We can't ignore the existence of what we call the auditor in the story. So it's open for your interpretations. Who is he? Is he talking to himself, to God? Who is that auditor? When do we call the narrator unreliable? When the speaker or the voice of the narration presents a kind of deceptive reading of the story. So his vision of the details of the story are consciously or unconsciously deceiving. So he means to deceive you, or it's unconsciously presented as deceptive. مخادع. So لما يكون الناريتور مخادع, or he presents things in a deceptive way, then he is unreliable. I can't trust him. How do I know? Like, there is something that all characters should react to, and he hides one character's reaction for a certain purpose, then he's deceptive, like he's not telling you everything, and we can call him unreliable. Sometimes the whole story is undermined by details in the story or the reader's general knowledge of facts outside the story, like the details, unnecessary details from the story, like he's digressing. The narrator is saying things unnecessary. I don't need them. Why should I care about these details, you ask yourself. And this will undermine means يقوض, destroy the truthfulness of this narrator in the story, the reliability of this narrator in the story. So we call him unreliable. Or sometimes the narrator refers to general knowledge, like scientific facts, or knowledge about the country, or he may say something about the United States of America, and this is all outside the action itself in the story. So you ask yourself, what is he doing here? It's like digression, or kind of transgress outside the story. So why should I care about it? If you have all these elements, then the narrator is, or one of them actually, or most of them, or some of them, then the narrator is unreliable. Sometimes stories are narrated by villains. So it's not the hero who's telling you the story, it's the other side, it's the villain, the evil character in the story. So how would you trust him? Insane people, fools, liars, hypocrites, munafiqeen, kadhibeen. So why should I trust such a narrator? Like in the Cask of Amontillado, you will see Montresor, who is a character in the story, and he's also the narrator telling you his story of killing his best friend. So would you trust him? Is he reliable that this man is killing his best friend? He's a killer. He's a criminal. Can you trust him? Or the narrator is unreliable in this way? If we have a third-person narrator with a limited point of view, we call it centered or central consciousness. So it's not necessarily, why should I care about this? Because students usually think that third-person narrators are unlimited and first-person narrators are limited. No. Sometimes we may have a third-person narrator with a limited point of view. So one narration tied to a single character throughout the story. The narrator often reveals this character's inner thoughts, but is unable to read the thoughts of others. A centered consciousness is clear in 2020 by Linda Brewer. She is focusing, or the narrator's voice focuses on bells, a single character, and it seems that the narrator here reveals Bell's inner thoughts, Bell's feelings, and he's unable to read through the mind of Ruthie. So we don't know why Ruthie refers to such wonderful, if you see them as wonderful sights, or as weird observations. Why does she think this way? Is she a crazy person? If she's childish and naive enough, innocent, or just a smart person, a genius who has a very big imagination, able to see beyond reality? So why do we have this focus on one character and not on the major part of conflict here, which is Ruthie? So that is a centered consciousness, or a third person narrator with a limited point of view. So let's just forget about these three pictures about Roman fever, because we're not reading it this semester. And so far, we did focus on narrative elements like the plot, the narration, the point of view, and we will continue with the symbol theme and setting. But we also discussed the literary techniques or narratives. So we covered flashback as a literary technique, we covered suspense, and today we're going to have two more techniques: stream of consciousness and irony. Stream of consciousness is here, and it's just from the term itself, the name itself, stream. It means like جدول or نهر صغير. So sometimes we refer to ideas or thoughts in Arabic as تدفق الأفكار. We say تدفق الأفكار or تدفق المشاعر. It's exactly this, the stream of consciousness. So this literary technique reveals the flow of thoughts. لاحظوا تدفق المشاعر والأفكار, thoughts and feelings of characters through long passages of soliloquy. Or you can define it as the mental processes of a character before they are formed into regular patterns of speech or logical sequence. So the mental processes, العمليات العقلية, thinking and thinking and thinking and reacting and reflecting and reacting again inside your mind, before they become regular speech, you say them out or act them out. So that inside process is called stream of consciousness. Stream of consciousness in literature has two forms, let's say, the interior monologue and the soliloquy. So the interior monologue is a passage in the story presenting a character's inner thoughts and emotions in a direct, sometimes in a disjointed or fragmentary manner. So you have a passage in the story, you have a paragraph in which the story, the narrator, presents the character's inner thoughts or inner emotions. So the character in this passage is thinking or feeling inside. So we don't have anything out loud. It's just inside his mind. It's direct, that it means it refers to a specific character. But sometimes it's fragmentary, like it's not connected, or it's just disjointed, غير متصلة أو غير متواصلة, مبعثرة from here and there. Because sometimes, look at yourself when you're thinking, you're disrupted sometimes, like you're thinking about something and then you have the disruption, and then you start thinking of something else, and then you go back to the first thing. So the idea of the fragmentary manner of the inner thoughts and emotions, and this is something that is very common in modern and postmodern literature. the use of interior monologue. So instead of characters acting, we have all the mental processes and the inner thoughts and emotions of characters instead. So remember, the inner, the interior, and monologue is mono. Mono refers to one. So it's not a dialogue, it's a monologue. Soliloquy is another form in which the character talks to himself or herself. So it reveals the character's thoughts when he thinks that he's alone or he's unaware of the presence of other characters. So the character thinks that he's alone and he starts thinking, but he responds to that thinking in a form of talking to himself. So the character is talking to himself. This is what we call soliloquy. عم بحكي مع حاله. So the idea of soliloquy is clear, a character talking to himself or herself. The second type of literary narrative technique that we have today is the irony. The irony is a situation or a statement. So the irony has two kinds. It could be a situation that we call situational irony, or it could be a statement, which is a verbal irony. So if it is a situational irony, it is characterized by a significant difference between what is expected, and you jump here to end what actually happens. So look at the red ones together and the blue ones together here. So a situation in which there is a difference. هناك اختلاف between what you expected and what really happens. You expected something. توقعت يصير شيء، يحدث شيء, and then something else happened. And this is the discrepancy. هاي الفرق أو المفارقة. In the verbal irony, it's actually words, statements. So it is not a situation, it's not an action or an event. حدث توقعته ولم يحدث. لا. It's something said in which there is a significant difference between what is understood and what is meant here. It means that the character says something, but he doesn't mean it. He means something else. So what is understood by other characters or by you as a reader in the story is actually different from what the character himself wanted to say or what he meant. So this is what we call verbal irony. Situational, verbal irony are both included in this slide. The third type of irony is the dramatic irony. It is the same. A character holds a position or has an expectation that is reversed or fulfilled in a way that the character did not expect. Okay, so it's the same as the situational irony. So there is a position in which the character is, and through that position, he expected things to turn out a certain way, but they actually turned out to be different, or they are reversed or fulfilled in a way that that character did not expect. ما توقع. But you, as readers, have anticipated because your knowledge of events or individuals is more complete than the characters. How? Why is your knowledge exceeds somehow, or the knowledge you have as a reader exceeds, تتجاوز, the knowledge of the characters? Because you've been told this by the narrator. So if the narrator tells you that this character is preparing or planning to kill another character, you know that this is going to happen, but the other character who is threatened doesn't know. So that is irony, because he holds a position, and this position is reversed in a way that he did not expect. He thought that this man is going to help him, and then he was killed. The character did not know or expect what is going to happen, but you knew as a reader that this is going to happen. If your knowledge is included here in the situation, then this is dramatic irony. This is an example of dramatic irony from Roman Fever, and we can call it ironic epiphany because one of the story's characters actually declared at the end of the story that she had a daughter that nobody knew about or knew about her father. So this is a kind of epiphany, which is a sudden realization. We discussed what epiphany is in the previous presentation. And because nobody expected that, even the reader, we call it ironic epiphany. So this is our presentation, narration, and point of view. I would like you to consider applying all these parts of the narration and point of view, the types, and the two ideas or devices of the stream of consciousness and irony. Remember, the stream of consciousness can appear as interior monologue or soliloquy, while irony can be verbal, situational, or dramatic. So we have three kinds of irony. So think about all these elements and devices when you're reading Raymond Carver's Cathedral. So you will find a new forum on e-learning for your discussions of this story. We have some discussion questions as well in addition to your roles. Thank you so much.